Welcome to Sunshine Cathedral's Queer God Squad. It's Friday, September 12th, 2025. I'm Bishop Terrell Watkins, the Senior Minister of the Sunshine Cathedral. With me today are Bishop Robert Griffin, Reverend Dr. Ann Atwell, and Reverend Kevin Tisdall. We are the Queer God Squad. Visit sunshinecathedral.org to learn more about us.
Queer God Squad was created by Hotspots Happening Out to support our mission to explore the value of faith in the LGBTQ community. There is no streaming TV show like this in the entire world.
In 2025, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of Hotspots magazine, the 5th anniversary of Queer News Tonight, with nearly 10,000 stories and 10 million views in 2024. We produced Pride Fest Diversity in August and Pride Fort Lauderdale early next year.
We are the largest nonprofit LGBTQ media organization in America, and we encourage you to support our mission to inform, entertain, and educate our community and allies.
This is the Sunshine Cathedral Perspective. Queer God Squad considers the Queen James Bible. In a big, fabulous Bible, the Queen James Bible and its queering of Scripture, Shannon Constantine presents a compelling analysis of the groundbreaking and controversial biblical text. Constantine's review delves into how the quote-unquote Queen James Bible seeks to create a more inclusive religious space by altering specific verses to be more accepting of queer identity. This is not simply a critique of the original text, but a deep exploration of the theological and social implications of its reinterpretation. Constantine examines the motivations behind the project, highlighting the desire to provide a scriptural foundation for LGBTQ+ Christians who have long felt alienated by traditional interpretations. She thoughtfully discusses the arguments for and against such a quote-unquote queering of Scripture, addressing concerns about textual integrity while celebrating the empowerment it offers to marginalized communities. The review is a balanced and insightful look at a modern effort to reconcile faith with identity, positioning Queen James Bible as a significant cultural artifact in the ongoing dialogue between religion and the LGBTQ community. The Queen James Bible was published in late 2012 under the authorship of quote-unquote God and is promoted by LGBTQ+ evangelical Christians. It has an introduction, but otherwise the text is not annotated and there are no scholarly notes throughout the volume. This book won't be of much value to the typical scholar, but for offering clearer renderings of the so-called clobber passages, this version could be useful to the queer Christian who is familiar with the King James Version. Not a cultural artifact in the ongoing dialogue between religion and the LGBTQ+ community. We at Sunshine Cathedral have been queering the Bible since the very beginning, and we continue to do so with reverence. We don't take anything in that Bible, out of that Bible that's not already there. Every single group looks at the Bible from their perspective, I believe. If you're looking at it from a black perspective, you hear something. If you look at it from a woman's perspective, you hear something else. If you look at it as a liberation theology, you hear something else. So to take the Queen James Bible and tear it apart and put it back together so that the queer nation can see themselves in it, yippee-ki-yo.
This is an evangelical tool. One of the promoters of it said something about that homophobia has kept the church from properly evangelizing LGBTQ people or whatever. So if we can clean that up, then queer people can be saved, not from their queerness, but so it's a very evangelical perspective. Still, if that's where you are, then you can at least rethink those passages that have been used against you. And what they do is there's no annotations. There's not. This is not something that you would use for if you were in seminary to do any work. But those handful of verses, they just rewrite them a bit to and so instead of the preacher having to say, this is the context, and this is what it means, and this is what the Greek is, and this is, how many times it was used, and any every time it was used like this is what it meant, blah, blah. Instead of doing that, they just take that and use what the word would be if you were using it today. So this is the King James Version of the Bible with about 8 verses that have been slightly tweaked to, not to change the meaning, but to make the meaning clearer. And so for that, it could be a valuable tool, especially for people who are from conservative backgrounds. My issue with it isn't that they tweaked a few verses. My issue with it is that it's the King James Version of the Bible.
Yeah.
It's just not a good translation. You may like the iambic pentameter, the Elizabethan English, which was already becoming passé. It was already not in common use when they did it. So it's you may think it's poetic and beautiful. What it isn't is clear and accurate. It was probably the best up until that time. I don't know. The Geneva Bible was around. The Douay Rheims, the Vulgate. So there were. I don't know. The King James was better, but it was the newest. It was the shiniest at the time. But I can't think of a seminary professor that I know or studied with that would allow you to turn in some paper using as your footnotes anything from the King James Version of the Bible. In fact, I know people that wouldn't allow NIV, and that's very contemporary scholarship. But the NIV tries to harmonize what isn't harmonious, and so if something seems to sort of contradict itself, they try to smooth that out. And some scholars just they don't like that. They think that's not being true to the, like if it's rough and ugly and not right, let it be what it is and then talk about it. So I don't like the King James, I don't like the NIV. But for people who that's what they know, this is probably a safer version, especially with those texts that are used against gay people. So it's a start. But if you're serious about Bible study, you're going to move beyond the King James Version anyway.
I had a conversation actually recently with someone, part of our LGBTQ plus community, who wanted to debate the Bible. And they kept referring to the King James, constantly referring to the King James. And yes, exactly. And I reiterated to them that, number one, you need to look at context. You need to look at a lot of different things. The King James Version is just not a good translation of the Bible. When I was in seminary, both my master's and my doctorate, you couldn't use it for any of your papers. So it was really just kind of trying to reiterate to them, look beyond this King James Version. Now, if something like this, yeah, I mean, it may be helpful, but I would really encourage anyone who wants to do Bible study to look at maybe an NRSV or something like that that has a better translation. Yeah. So.
Yeah, my preferred Bible for study is actually the NRSV. I love the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. But, and this is one of those things that this conversation kind of takes me back to seminary for a minute here, because if in the process of studying, there was this thing called word study. And I used to love word study. People don't have the time to do the word study, but it's really where you chase the rabbit of the word. And how does this particular word make this sentence read, why it makes it read the way it does. And a lot of that work really was important to me because it helped me get to the nuance of what the sentence was of the scripture was all about. And it was during the word study process that I actually learned, when you break the thing down, this is not what people have been saying it has said. This is completely saying something else. You look at the words and the context and all of that, and it becomes amazing what you can take away from it. I grew up on the King James Version of the Bible. That was what was in the house. That was what everybody knew. Because I remember asking my teacher one day, he's like, why don't we speak like this? Well, we don't speak like that when in doubt, should us and would us and could us and all that, because that's just not who we are. And I remember saying, well, this is not who I am, so why are you making me read it? That didn't go over too well. But it's, later, I appreciated the different versions of the Bible, and I appreciate, being able to lay the parallel Bibles, kind of side by side and do some comparison stuff now. And again, from their perspective, if this is what helped people, if this helps bridge the gap for somebody, for their need to understand how these things work, kudos to them, and go deeper and go wider and go further when it comes to studying scripture.
I always thought that all that Elizabethan language was fancy, that it was meant to be
poetry,
fancy. So I was very stunned in high school Spanish when we're learning about, the common use of things, and my teacher would say the thou form. I'm like, what are you talking about, the thou form? Because that's the common, that's the informal. And so all of this thee, thou, it is the informal language of the time. It is meant to be contemporary and informal. So the spirit of that would be the Message or the Living Bible, or something, or even the NRSV, something that's a real translation, but in language that you actually speak, the way you speak it. So that's another thing, that while you're doing all this thee and thou, if you were honoring the spirit of that, you would talk like you talk, because that was the point of it. It was to be informal. And in case you're wondering about the clobber passage, we've said it like you know what they are. 1 Corinthians 6:9, where it talks about these various offenses. Romans 1:26 and 27, and then 1 Timothy 1:10, which is really just copying the 1 Corinthians passage. And then there's 2 verses in Leviticus, one in chapter 18, one in chapter 20. And then some people will throw in the Sodom and Gomorrah story. So those are the clobber passages. The Sodom and Gomorrah story there's an attempted gang rape, and then at the end, then along the way, a woman dies a horrible death, and then at the end, the hero of the story has incest with both of his daughters. And somehow people have decided that story is no, that story is not. It's not about attraction or love or commitment or even a really fun one-night stand. That story is gang rape and incest and death. And okay, those are ugly things, but has nothing to do with people being gay. And the same thing with the Pauline stuff, the 1 Corinthians, Romans 1, context of temple worship, of idolatry. And because people worshiping improperly, God turned them over to a reprobate mind. And so confused, they didn't even know if they were gay or straight. They didn't know what to do. They were doing things they normally wouldn't do. That wasn't their sin, it was their punishment for worshiping improperly. And if it was indeed pagan worship in a pagan temple with all these idols, orgies were pretty common, temple prostitution was pretty common, and sometimes people would get so caught up in it they would actually harm themselves. They would decide they want to be a eunuch priest in the temple, and they would just eunuchize themselves right there. But that caught up in the moment, well, you can't undo it then. And it talks about, therefore they inherited the due penalty in their bodies. Well, because they hurt themselves. So again, crazy orgy where knives are involved, not homosexuality. That's not love. That's not attraction. That's not even a consensual one-night stand. And then there, the 1 Corinthians 1, chapter 6, verse 9 and 10, it talks about, I think the King James Version says sodomites, which is one of those bad things about King James, because it's not sodomite. The words there basically mean top and bottom. But the context is basically a prostitute, a boy prostitute and his customer. And so the context is exploitation. Again, not two people seeing each other across a crowded room, running slowly into each other's arms, and it's not love, not attraction, not consensual. Every time something in the Bible is used to say this is a condemnation of homosexuality, if you look at what it is saying, it is condemning exploitation or violence, not sexual orientation, not love, not attraction. So, so what this Queen James Version does, supposedly, is to take those verses and say what they really mean, instead of the way they've been misused. So I guess in that passage it would say something like, instead of sodomite, it would say boy prostitute and his customer, or something like that, so that you would get the real meaning. So that's what we're talking about with this stuff. That's what supposedly Queen James makes a little bit easier. I say just get a better translation, and ask somebody, and study it properly. But it's out there. You can get it on Amazon, and try it out to see if you like it. But that's today with the Queer God Squad.
Before we go, I want to invite you to check out Performing Arts Series. Yes, the season is upon us. Sunshine Cathedral Center for the Performing Arts has a great acts lineup for 2025 through 2026 season. Here is a taste of what is coming up.
Golden Ghouls, Picture It, Halloween 2025 will be on our stage one night only, October 25th.
Then on November 7th, we welcome back Miss Coco Peru in Fuck This Shit. If this show is like her other tours de force, there will be storytelling, laughs, singing, and a moral to tie up the evening. Or maybe this one is entirely different. You'll have to come to the show to know for sure. But you already know it's going to be one of the best nights of comedy and drag artistry you will have enjoyed all year.
December 7th brings Matthew Darren's annual Holiday Fantasia, always amazing, and this year it will again be co-hosted by Varla Jean Merman.
And in 2026, there are already some great shows lined up, such as Selections from Pearly, a musical based on the play Pearly Victorious by Ossie Davis on February the 7th. For more information about these shows and others, and to secure your tickets, go to sunshinecathedral.org/arts.
Please like and share this episode on your social media and look for Sunshine Cathedral on Facebook or Instagram.
You can also like our individual pages on Facebook. Remember to visit sunshinecathedral.org frequently. There you will find Bishop Talk, where Bishop Durrell and I interview queer religious leaders, activists, and scholars.
Thank you for joining the Queer God Squad today. We are here daily at 3 p.m. to have some fun and to discuss what our LGBTQ community is talking about.
Sunshine Cathedral is the world's leading progressive queer church. Progressive, queer, and God are words that naturally should go together. Remember that we are all in this together. Also remember, you are God's miracle, not God's mistake. Until next time, we are the Queer God Squad.